Hello, Lauren here with Lauren Elizabeth Animal Art, and I create therapeutic animal art tutorials for daily creative quiet time. So I've been going strong in my 365 days of creative quiet time. I have a link to that below if you'd like to see all the things I've been working on. But in today's tutorial, we'll be finishing off Reba, the potbelly pig. All right, guys, let's get painting. So I'm going to start with my size 6 flat brush, and I'm going to mix up a deep yellow with my yellow ochre and white. That's a lot of yellow ochre because this is our first layer of fur. And I love this brush because the flat edge that I'll be using to create the strands of fur is like the perfect length. Potbelly pigs have really thin hair. They hardly have much at all, but what they do have is really long and rough. And so what I'm trying to do is leave lots of gaps in between each strand. So it's really important that we're really intentional about each strand that we lay down. We must pay attention to the direction of the fur, which will change throughout the pig's face and body. And because we have to leave these gaps and they're going to be long strands of fur, it's more easy to see our mistakes. So you want to apply the same amount of pressure, which is very little, so that you have that thin little strand of fur instead of those thick clumpy ones, and you want all these strands to be about the same width and length. So if you watch me, I'm going to make these long fur strands clustered together, and they're pointed more vertically from the forehead up to the top of the back, and then they're pointed more to the left on the left side of the face and more to the right on the right side of the face. And they're all about the same length. They get a little bit longer around the back and body. So just take your time, and as you can see around the ear, they're more climbing up that ear, so I'm going to then work more horizontally with my brush instead of vertically. Now I've added more markings to my painting than what you see in the reference photo. But whatever kind of markings you've applied, you still want to lay those strands over top of it. It's still gonna look very realistic if you cut into it like I'm doing right here. In a little bit, what we'll be doing is creating a slightly lighter fur color than what we use to apply that base on the markings area, and then we'll be cutting into this yellow part. Next, we're going to work on that snout, which, if you notice, has shorter strands of fur. So I'm going to change to a size 1 round brush, and I'm also going to make it lighter. So I'll add some white to this paint mixture we were just using to apply the other first layer of fur, and then make sure you have enough because we'll also apply it in other areas. All right, so we're going to continue on with this color while we have it. Now I know we still have other areas that is just showing the base and we haven't applied one layer of fur, but while this is still wet, I want to work it into some other areas that are really getting exposed to that light. So what you'll see that I'm doing is I'm both going over the strands that I've already laid down and applying new ones. Still, however, not going over all my base layer. All right, so now we're going to add a layer of fur around the neck and chin area. That area is getting a lot less light, and so I want to make this much darker. So into that mixture we were just using, I'm going to add in yellow ochre, raw sienna, and eventually you'll see I add a little bit of black because I just can't quite get that dark enough. Now you'll see that I actually end up filling in more than I do creating little fur strands because we want to have a darker base than we do fur. And here I'm going darker over my lighter colored base. So this is just a learning lesson here. You always want to have a darker base than the fur you're putting over top. So I go around all of the face and the head looking for areas that is just getting a bit of the shadow. And I cut in around the yellow fur strands and some of the markings that we've applied. As I was painting this, the darker areas, it almost looks like mud and like just that dirtiness that we can often sometimes see on the face of a pig. All right, so we're going to let that fur dry and then move on to the fur over top our dark markings. Now, if you watch me, I created a dark gray, but it actually was a little too light. So my recommendation to you is to add more black than I did or less white. And we're just going to be cutting in where we have our markings into the yellow fur. The fur gets quite a bit longer around the back and the body, so I'm going to move to my size 6 flat brush by Arteza. I'm going to make sure it's clean and damp, and I'm going to very carefully cluster lines of this dark gray in between the yellows. You can really see this. It's a lot more obvious than if we were to make some mistakes with our fur around the face, just because it's vertical, it's up and down, so we have to be real careful with all the little ends of our fur. For the next layer on our dark markings, I'm going to go in with a little bit of white to make it dark gray, and with my size 6 flat brush, I'm going to repeat that same technique where I just go over strands that I've already applied and make some more. I felt like the top of Reba's back looked too bare, so I needed to add another marking. So just coming out from behind that cap, I added another little marking. I also felt like I needed to round out her back a little bit more, and so I'm using a really dark gray, almost black here. And then where I really need to add black is inside the ears, especially on this ear here. I'll be cutting into that fur just with the edge of my flat brush. And I'll do that to both ears. Now, of course, somehow I have to squeeze some metallic paint into this, so I pulled out my Arteza Pearl Pink, and I'm going to mix magenta with some of this metallic pearl pink and white using my size 1 round brush. So with the majority of Reba's fur done, not all of it, but most, we can now add the cupcake icing over top. So I'll be spreading this all over the tops of our cupcake holders really loosely, just making this look messy and fluffy, almost like little clouds that I'm putting over top these blue cupcake holders. And of course, I'll add some to Reba. I'll add some dabs of this light pink around her snout, nose, and forehead. Now, in just a moment, I'm going to add some to the mouth, but I realized it just didn't look right to me. You're welcome to have it smothered all around her lips and mouth and nose, but I ended up taking that out, covering that up with my previous browns that we used, so you're welcome to skip past this part and move on. This is, however, in this next step where I add some magenta to her outer lips. Using the paint mixture left over of raw sienna and black, I just carry on that indent on her snout on the top over to the right a bit more. To give the cupcakes more of a three-dimensional look, I add some highlights of white, just dabbing that all over all the cupcakes. And of course the splatters on Reba's face. This gives it nice texture, almost like it's icing that you can just reach out and touch. Alright, so next I'm going to use black and my size 1 round brush to create that string that's holding that cap on Reba's head. I want to have it on the left side, just coming off the left side of her face. First I draw it down into her marking, but then I realize I want it going off around her left cheek. And then on the right side it goes over her head and then behind her right ear. Now I really want that nose to stand out, to look close up to the viewer, and so I create a medium pink with my magenta and white, not too light, also not too dark, right there in the middle, and I'm going to outline the nose as well as the lips. Remember, there's a tiny, tiny little dip that kind of goes up and down at the very bottom, closer to the lips on the nose. And then inside those lips, I want to make them dark, so I'm going to fill that in with black. And that's when I realized we still need to add some shading to the lower part of Reba's face. So again, I mix up my raw sienna and black, and I find some areas around that chin, around the lower mouth area that I can add this. And similar to what I was doing before, I'm both creating that fur texture, those clusters of lines, and also partly filling in to make it kind of look like she's collecting dirt down there, being so close to that ground, she's getting a little dirty. Now the area around the hat looks like it needs more fur. It just looks a little wonky having that shadow and then the light fur strands, so we need to add more of that color. So I'm going to use yellow ochre, white, and my size 0 rigger brush. First I'll give Reba some long eyelashes, then I'll also add some more fur around the hat that layers over top that medium brown base. I'm going to continue on the right side, pulling some of these strands of fur into my black area around the inner ear. If you look real closely on Reba's ears, she has these tiny little strands of fur that are just kind of going off the border of her ear. So I'm going to also pull this into that black. I'm still not sure if this is entirely necessary, but I went ahead and added a little border on the opposite side of Reba's left ear. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard of the grocery store called Mariano's. We have one that just popped up close to us, and every time Anna Grace and I are there, we see these adorable little cupcakes with these little pins in them. It looks like stickers almost. And I've been trying to figure out what painting I can add this to, so I just couldn't wait to paint these in now. So what I'm doing is I'm just going to place the round shape of them with my rigger brush and black. And then once I have the shape down with a larger brush, I'll fill in them in with black. All right, next we're going to work on those sprinkles. I decide to create some light blue sprinkles, and so I mix up white with my phthalo blue. That's lots of white with phthalo blue. And I grab my size 1 round brush to create these little circles all over all the cupcakes, even on the splatters on Reba's face. Now, my aunt in England is like a professional baker. She is so talented at designing cakes. So again, I challenge you to get real creative here, not just with sprinkles, but anything you want to add to them. We're going to let our little cupcake pins dry completely, especially because this is black. And then we'll add a border around it and then fill in the center. All right, so we're going to move back to Reba's face. I see an area that I can use just black, and right below the nose and right by that lower lip, I'm going to fill that area in with black to make it look like this little piggy is oinking and excited about 2022. And I'm going to extend that black out pretty far along the left and right sides of the mouth. Again, with my dark brown of raw Sienna and black, I just add a few more dabs of my shading around her mouth. Still using my black, I touch up the eyes, just lifting those eyelashes up slightly. And while I still have black on my brush, I'm just going to fill in a little bit more of those nostrils. I have added some Arteza gold paint to my paint palette, and with Arteza gold and white and completely dried little stickers, I'm going to outline the borders, just the outer edges of both of them. Again, I'll let that dry, and I'm going to go back to my black and just touch up the string around the hat. I want it to stick out around the right cheek. Next, very carefully with your smallest brush, I actually recommend a rigger brush. The thickest would probably be the one I'm using, the size 1 round brush. Your thinnest one, so we can do the numbers. I'm going to do 20, 22 in each one of these black areas inside these little pins, stickers, whatever you want to call it. So here I suggest you step back from your own painting and just look at where you can add any touch-ups. There's just a few more things that I add to finish off this painting. I bring up the lips a little bit more on the lower lip, and then I blend in pinks with some browns around the nose to make it look more smooth and not such a thick, bold outline around it. So I mix up my browns, which is my raw Sienna black, and also my mixture of magenta and white. I blend those in, especially around the border and around the front bottom of the nose. Going along with this celebration party theme, I use some gold swirls all over the background as well as over top a Reba. And I'm just using Arteza gold for this. It's not mixed with anything else, just gold. And I'm just going to apply some large swirls, some small swirls all over the background, and as well, especially around her back, I'll layer them over top Reba. And then there was those eyes. I know in our reference photo we don't have any indication of color of her eyes, even where those eyes are, we just see a shadow. So I very subtly decide that I'll use a dark gray, a very dark gray, that's black and white. So very carefully I create little curved lines. They're closer to the bottoms of the eyes because there's so much shadow on the top. And this makes it look like the iris, we just barely see the iris, the colored part of the eye. And we're not covering the pupil, that will stay black. Alright, so I'm going to add the final swirls to my Potbelly Pig painting. Guys, I hope you enjoyed yourself, and I really want to wish you the best start to your 2022. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below. I look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial. Bye!